We're happy to welcome Kelsey Timmerman, world traveler and author of Where Am I Wearing, blogger, speaker, and participant at the Kelley School in a number of events. Kelsey, we're happy to have you back at Kelley.
Yeah, good to be back.
I feel like you're almost a Kelley person now.
Yeah, it's like maybe my third or fourth time being here in the last few years. So, and every time it snows. So there you go.
Great. I'll let you talk about your book. There's no reason in me talking about the book, but you had a fascinating concept based on a job you had when you were scuba diving in Key West and kind of living the good life. Give us a little background.
Yeah, so I was working as a dive instructor in Key West with putting my anthropology degree from Miami University to good work, where my boss actually was an anthropology major as well, funny enough. So I would work as a dive instructor, I'd save up some money, and I was a traveler, and I would go somewhere and where I could stretch out my money somewhere in the developing world, and I would travel for an extended period of time and blow all my money and then come back. So I never needed much of an excuse to travel, and I had this t-shirt that had tattooed from Fancy Island on it, and it said, "Come with me to my tropical paradise." So I was looking for that next trip. So I thought, yeah, this t-shirt, I wonder where Tattoo's Tropical Paradise is. So I checked the tag, and it said made in Honduras. And then off I went to Honduras. And in Honduras, I went jungle hiking, I went scuba diving, to an island village to play baseball. I thought everybody in Honduras had learned to play baseball, but thought it was like the national pastime or whatever. But apparently it wasn't. And then I decided to take this one afternoon, and at least go to the factory my shirt was made. So I showed up at that factory, and I met, I couldn't get a tour of the factory because, it just doesn't really happen. And I waited alongside the factory for the workers to be let out. And I met one worker whose name was Emil Carr. He's 25, he lives with his parents, he likes to play soccer. And I had a lot of questions for him. You hear things about sweatshops and child labor and bad working conditions surrounding the garment industry. It's kind of like the buzzwords. And all those kind of things were swirling around in my head from a sociology class I'd taken in college, a couple years previously. And I didn't ask those questions. And I think deep down I really didn't want to know the answers. So I continued on my merry way, traveling, and it just really ate at me that I didn't ask those questions. So then because every day, most days, I wear clothes. And I thought I really should know about the lives of the people who make our clothes. So then I looked at my wardrobe and pulled out my favorite items of clothing, including my Jingle These Christmas boxers, which were made in Bangladesh, my All-American Levi's blue jeans made in Cambodia, and my flip-flops that were made in China. And I said I was going to go to those places and meet the workers, and this time I was going to ask the questions I wasn't able to ask Emil Carr in Honduras.
So you eventually went to all those places, as well as to a place in upstate New York on your honeymoon to visit a factory where something else had been made. Maybe not the best idea. And, people might be wondering, well, okay, so this sounds like kind of the worker's story, but I asked a group of students who have read this book yesterday in one of my classes, do you think this fits in a marketing class, which is what I teach? And it was 100%. They all thought this belonged. So, what do you think your major learning from these journeys would be?
That everything. There's this table that we're sitting at right now. Maybe it was made in the USA. It probably wasn't. Someone made this table, and this is their livelihood. And they're trying to put their kids through school. Who's making this table? And it just made me look at stuff completely differently. Make my wardrobe. I look at that and I think about all of the workers and lives that were involved. And people want to beat up the garment industry sometimes, operating in the developing world. Or some people want to say that free trade will save the world, and other people want to say that these people are being exploited. And for me, I found that the truth is in the middle. And sometimes I'll go to universities and they'll ask me, is globalization good or is globalization bad? I'm like, wow, that is a really bad question. I know that. So this shades of gray, and that how much these workers sacrifice to have these jobs, but often they're not making enough. They're just right on the edge of falling to an extreme poverty, and often they do. And a single mother I met in Bangladesh, her name was Rifa, a single mother of 3 kids. She's earned $24 per month, and rice costs $15 per month. That is not enough, and there's a lot of challenges that family faces. And one of the things that they had to do was her oldest son, Armand, who's 18, he would go to Saudi Arabia to work to earn money to send home. So kind of the new economy that they're moving into is challenging some of their family structures and their cultural beliefs and all that kind of stuff. So for me, it's this journey was, and that was my goal, is to put a face on the people who make our clothes and to show their personalities, hopes, and dreams. And a lot of times when people, we focus on this type of thing, people paint garment workers or people living in poverty or near poverty as two-dimensional figures, just to be, oh, I feel sorry for them. And yes, there's definitely situations that are touching and awful, and we should feel sorry for that. But so many of the situations too are the sitting around eating rice, sitting on the floor, people cracking up, laughing. You know, you go to Bangladesh because your underwear were made there. The Bangladeshis are going to make fun of you. So I thought that was something really important to capture is the personalities of the workers and just kind of put a face and really to show how similar we all are. Even like everything I'm wearing right now, if you added it up, how much would it be worth, right? So if I was just holding my iPhone, which is in my pocket, and I had my glasses on, I would be darn near close to $1,000 already of stuff on my person. And then think about a mother in Bangladesh earning $24 per month. It seems like, wow, we come from completely two different worlds. What can we possibly have in common? But you know what I learned is that we have way more in common than I would have ever imagined.
Is it fair to say, based on your travels and your book and all your writing, that a garment worker in one developing country is very similar to a garment worker in another developing country? Are their lives roughly the same?
There are generalizations that you can make, and throughout history, even when we had a garment industry back in the United States, which we still, I guess, have a really teeny tiny one. Only like 3% of clothes are still made in the United States, but it's typically girls in their late teens and early 20s who come from the rural areas to go to the big cities to work. And it's always kind of been a truth that the more docile, the less outspoken someone would be, the better garment worker they would make, because they are always kind of working for the lowest wages. I mean, it might be the first rung of the ladder of being part of a global economy or a national economy or whatever. But still, it's not the world's best job. So you could say that they usually move from the countrysides, usually from the farms, to the factories. It's kind of the first step in that game. They're typically girls in their late teens, early 20s, although I met a lot of guys as well working in the garment industry. And I think that pretty much sums it up. And often they're moving into places, for instance, in China, the migrant labor that comes into it. They come into a place where they don't, often they don't speak the language. Sometimes they just live on the dorm on the factories and they never leave the factories. And you can even look at, in some countries, like we had made in American, like made in USA, that was being produced in Saipan. And it said made in USA, but it was made by imported workers from Bangladesh and China and, places like that. So still, these are people moving far away from home, usually for the first time, kind of really out of their element. And I think that really kind of describes that's a generalization, but I think that it kind of describes like the average garment worker.
It seems to me from our interaction and from the book that you've come to the conclusion that business can make a huge difference in world humanity issues. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so, the things like sweatshops and things like child labor, which often get thrown up when any discussion about the garment industry, these are just symptoms of the extreme poverty that is out there. So people that want to end that, they're just treating a symptom. So we need to look bigger picture. And I think that business and the garment industry does something really important. It provides jobs. That is a huge thing in these places where there's little opportunity to give somebody a job. Often it's the first time that they've had a job. For the women in Bangladesh, often they've never had control of the purse strings ever before. And there's something called the girl effect, where if you give a woman a wage, he spends 90% of it on her family. You give a man a wage, he spends 30 to 40% on his family. So employing women is something that garment industry does. It's and in manufacturing that is really, really important. Now, through my travels, I was in Africa this spring, and I checked in on several different NGOs. And so if you're talking business versus NGO, which is going to save the world, I think that they both play a part. But the interesting thing is that both of the heads of these NGOs had their MBAs. So there's one organization called Nuru, who's a started by Jake Harriman, and maybe they even have a chapter here on the IU campus. Where they do these different events, and he got his MBA from Stanford. And he was a Special Forces Marine, got out, went to Stanford and social entrepreneurship, and then started up Nuru, and now they're opening up all these different places in all these countries and helping people gain access to markets and helping farmers with their business models and teaching them, bringing them together for like lending groups and saving groups and just all these amazing things. So I think that those worlds are kind of blending. I think that aid's kind of being turned on its head. So you can kind of look at it at a way. Let's talk about shoes. So you could go, if someone needs a pair of shoes, you could just give them a pair of shoes, right? And then what do they have in 6 months, a year, 2 years? They have a wore-out pair of shoes, or maybe if it's a kid, they grew out of them. Well, there's a group, and there's a business in Ethiopia I checked on this spring called Soul Rebels, which I'm wearing a pair right now. Pull it off here, right here, Soul Rebels, right? And this shoe, everything comes from within 60 miles of the factory, right? The tire, the sole of the shoe is recycled tire. But the really important thing is that the girl who started this said she saw no change in her community after 30 years of NGOs being around. So she wanted to do something different. So she started a business. And today she employs 75 people, and she pays them about 3 times what the normal worker in Ethiopia gets. She sends their kids to school. And that's what everybody wants. They just want a job that they can send their kids to school. No garment worker, another generalization, I guess, no garment worker wants their kids to grow up to be a garment worker. And Bethlehem, the owner of Soul Rebels, is providing jobs that can happen. Upward mobility of some type. So I think business plays a key role. I think the garment industry does. I think it has this huge potential to give people jobs. Now, the jobs that they have right now, a lot of those should be better. They're just right on the edge, and not all garment workers can send their kids to school. That's too expensive, and maybe they have to send their kids off to pick up recyclables along the side of the road and things like that. So if businesses can start to provide jobs where we can, the families can educate their kids, they can not just be on the edge of death sometimes. If something goes badly wrong, if someone gets sick and you don't have the money to save them, that's the end of the road. So I think business plays an important role in that, and I think that the NGO world is starting to learn from the business world. Things like microfinance are becoming pretty popular, and it used to be where the NGOs would just hand out stuff, and now they're looking for more sustainable ways where they can move in, they can give people a specific set of skills, they can help them with their business models, help them reach different markets, and then pull out, and then there's this sustainable livelihoods where people can always buy shoes because they have a wage and they can buy shoes for their whole family as long as they have that job.
If a chief marketing officer was to say, I want to take an ethical path, so I'm going to pull all of our employment, all of our factories out of this country because I'm worried about the conditions of the workers, what effect does that decision have? The person, the individual, the executive is trying to make a decision to be ethical. Mm-hmm. What effect does that have in that country?
So I think it's really complex. So I asked a really simple question, and I got a really simple answer in Cambodia. I sat down with one of the girls, and I said, some people in the United States don't approve that you get $50 per month, and that's not enough for you to support your 6 or 7 family members. They don't approve of how you're treated or whatever, even though Cambodia is probably an example of one of the countries in the developing world that has some of the best practices. So if I sit down and ask that girl, I was like, what would you tell them when they said they don't want to buy their products because of that? And she said, well, if they don't buy our stuff, then I don't have a job. Now, is it that simple? Probably not, but it's interesting. I think that anyone that does these big shifts have to realize that places like Bangladesh and Cambodia, 3/4 of their exports are garments. So if everyone decides that they don't approve of something in Cambodia or something in Bangladesh, which has happened before, Bangladesh in the 1992, the whole Kathy Lee thing, child labor. So the American companies were really starting to pull their orders from Bangladesh, and at that point in time there was child labor. So the kids, the industry laid off the kids, and essentially like things like child prostitution went up. So it's a really complex world. So just I think we really need to think about these decisions and how they're going to impact people on all different levels before they're made.
You visited a business that was rated by some organization, and you can explain it, I can't, but it was rated as an A+, we are humane.
Yeah.
What was your experience with that?
Yeah, so there's this little guide called the Better World Shopping Guide that you can put in your back pocket, right? And if you want to, you're in a store, you can see like what's the best type of fish to eat, A through F, environmentally, socially responsible fish. Where's the best gas station to buy gas at? And it grades them A through F. And one of the things in there is shoes. And I went to a shoe factory in China, where Deckers, which makes Simple, Tevas, and Uggs, sources their shoes from this factory. And Deckers has an A+ in this book for environmentally and socially conscious, company, an A+. And so when I was there and I'm talking with the workers, I found out that the workers work 100 hours per week. They work every single day. They clock out and then they go back to work.
Not on the clock.
Not on the clock. Off.
As if they're volunteering.
Yes, as if it's a privilege to make our shoes, and they're just doing it for fun. And that's an A+, and I get to thinking about that, and it's like maybe they are actually an A+, and on a curve, they are an A+. And also another little interesting piece of that is I think that there's a lot more weight on the environmental aspects of products. I think that's something that's easier to market than the social. Because when you think about Levi's and you think about the commercials where it's a kid skipping through a sprinkler with just a pair of Levi's and a sparkler and Walt Whitman reading a poem in the background, that's really hard. That's really hard to line that image up with the reality of 8 workers living in a tiny dorm room, 4 sleeping on the floor, 4 on a bamboo bed. These are really tough to meet up. So I think that's Deckers does a lot with like social, like environmentally friendly glues and rubbers and things like that. And there's organic cotton. You hear about stuff like that, but you don't hear about, well, this was made in good working conditions. So I think for the marketing world, I think that's a challenge that they're going to have to look at, is that how do we line up these images? If we want to start offering an ethically, socially responsible garment or product, how do we get that word out there in a way that we're not going to be attacked for? And I think that's a tough thing to do.
Not only are you a global traveler, but then you end up traveling to universities, especially universities, all across the United States, from California to wherever. What is your impression of student response specifically to, I guess the question would be, is the human factor, is humanity important to customers when you look in students' eyes and you tell them these stories?
Well, I think universities have made some of the biggest moves on some of the social responsibility of garments. There's like the United Students Against Sweatshops, whatever, everyone's heard about that, and I don't always super agree with everything that they do, because I always think in terms of what does this impact have on the country. So when they're protesting like a union busting in Honduras, and the company leaves and takes the jobs instead of messing with the mess there that the USAS was supporting, then where's the worker left? But the students have put a lot of pressure on universities to offer ethical options. There's a garment factory in Dominican Republic called Alta Gracia Factory, which actually pays a living wage, and a lot of student pressure has led to university bookstores offering that type of option. I really think that people do connect with the stories. I think this is something that we don't always look at anymore, and it's something a lot of people haven't considered. This is something that's been taken away from us recently. We used to know the butcher, the baker, the garment maker. My grandpa, when he bought a pair of underwear, the people who made that underwear, his lives probably weren't too unlike the level of living. Where today, we have no idea what these lives are like. So to stand in front of students with a 30-foot picture of a garment worker I met in Bangladesh and say, here's Arifa, and here's her personality, and here's what she makes, and here's the struggles she faces, I think that really has an impact on them. At least I hear that it does. I like to think that it does.
The human connection. Do you have a story of a person in Cambodia that you would want us to reflect on?
You're feeding me a question here.
Yeah.
So who specifically are you talking about? I mean,
Yeah,
anybody?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in Cambodia, so there's a, it's not even a garment worker, I guess I'll talk about. one of the things I did in Cambodia was someone told me I should go to the dump. And this is like the worst place I've ever been in my entire life. You know, just burning trash. It's
absolute
like
hell on earth.
Yeah, the sight makes you want to throw up. The smell makes you want to throw up, and you just eventually have to turn your back and walk away because you don't want the people who work there collecting recyclables to see that what they do and where they do it sickens me. So but I met some kids there picking through old trash, and there was a girl who was maybe 11 years old, and went up and we started playing some frisbee with some of the kids, and just to be able to look at that girl and think, wow, she'd be better off making blue jeans. They earn 25 cents per day collecting recyclables. And going into this, I mean, I didn't go in with an agenda. I didn't try to go in with a lot of preconceived notions. But I guess I always kind of equated child labor equals bad. And at that moment, the whole world kind of flipped upside down for me and thought, wow, this is way more complex than I would have ever imagined. So that's kind of points to if good jobs move in where that girl's parents could afford to have her do something else, then they relied on her. To have kids make our clothes isn't the worst thing. The worst thing is that we live in a world where a mother who loves her daughter will send her daughter off to do some job. And that's the world that we live in. That's the reality. So if that mother could have a job that she could send her daughter off to do something else, that'd be great. So I think business can fill that gap and should and is in some cases.
Great. The book is called Where Am I Wearing? It impacted me. You've impacted hundreds of my students. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Now we're hoping to impact more people via a video clip. So Kelsey Timmerman, again, thanks for being with us. And to anybody that might end up watching this as a garment worker in Cambodia, thank you. My jacket came from Cambodia. I like my jacket very much. And I appreciate the fact, and now I think every time I wear this jacket, I'm going to think about somebody in Cambodia that put the time and the effort the way maybe my great-great-great-great-grandparents did somewhere in, Pennsylvania to make a product when we used to make things by hand. That's what they're still doing there. Yeah. And I didn't see the world that way as you've helped me see it.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Again, Kelsey Timmerman, thanks for being with us. Thanks for sharing with the Kelley School.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you.